Welcome to my compost bins. I have a 3-bin system, and today we're going to talk about how to actually flip from one to the other, and when to flip, but mainly how to flip. For starters, this is where my greens, most new stuff goes. This is my stuff that's really cooking for a while, and this is my done pile. Let me show you guys. So right now, you can see with my green pile, my wife threw a bunch of things in there recently, but it's back down to around 90 degrees-ish in the middle of the compost. This is empty right now. I'll explain that in a second. And here's my done that has some compost that we've made a while back, and we've used most of it, but we'll continue to use it as we need to for houseplants and so forth. In the winter, rather, the end of the season, we'll have some compost made that's done. We'll take that and actually spread it into the garden, okay? That'll be used and it'll just sit over winter. Meanwhile, the pile that we have, other than that, which will be what will be in here, we'll sit over winter and try to compost as much as we can over winter. I made a video a while back about composting over the winter, tips we learned from that. You might want to check that out. But anyway, after the winter's done, we have compost in the spring, right around June or so, it's actually usable, and we'll use that to help supplement and plant things. And then we'll be gathering more things as we have here. Then from around June to now, which is mid-September, we have kitchen scraps, grass clippings, all kinds of things we've taken down from the early crops from the garden, and all that stuff ends up in here. Also, in this case, some flowers and bushes and all kinds of things. But anyway, what I do from June to September is I end up doing what I'm going to do today, except I go back and forth between these two bins to basically help aerate it. So every week or two, I'll just flip it back and forth. It makes the compost faster. So for today, we're going to flip it from bin 1 to bin 2, and we'll go from there. First thing I'd like to do is take off the sides. Oh, if you want to know how I made this, I actually stole the design from someone else online. I'll provide a link to that in the description. It's a slight variation of it. Maybe one day I'll make a video on how I made this and how it's working out, and some changes I would have made if I'd have known more back then, things I knew now. If I knew then what I know now, what changes would I have made? And there are definitely a few changes I would have made to the system, but it's a pretty good system. I'm not complaining. All right, first thing I like to do, see all this stuff over here? This is the stuff my wife and I just kind of threw in here. I like to chop it up. I don't like it to be like this because it's not going to compost nearly as quickly as if it were in smaller pieces. So, grab my handy dandy hedge clippers and go to town. Let me take the thermostat out first. Not sure if you can see that. Yeah, it's a little over 90 degrees right now. The batch, when I moved it into here and when it was at its hottest, it was about 135 or so, which is enough. If it stays that way for a few days, it'll kill off most things, any of the old bacteria, disease, and whatnot. And it got up that hot, and it was probably less than a cubic yard at that point. When I flip it back over here, it'll probably still be slightly less than a cubic yard, but you need a lot of size to get a lot of temperature. So I'm not sure if I'll keep adding to it or if this will be the final pile that I hope to be completely composted by November. So when our full takedown happens, and we spread throughout the garden, this will be the pile for that, but we'll see. That's good enough for now. Now what I'm going to do is take my pitchfork, start flipping it, and as I see things that are longer in there, I can clip them again. Maybe after they end up in here, I can clip them a little bit again. But you want to end up with as small of pieces as possible, within reason. You don't want to be out here all day clipping things, but the temperature is going to be hot enough in September and October here in Chicagoland to where I don't need to worry about clipping it up as finely as I would for winter composting. Over the winter, you want things to be really small, as small as possible. But before I actually make the first flip, I like to take some kitchen scraps and throw them in. That makes the nice new base for the new compost pile. It's like gasoline for a fire. Nice kitchen scraps at the bottom of the compost pile. And I grab my pitchfork, but before I actually start flipping this, I know from experience what's going to happen is I'm going to get in there a couple of times, and then I'm going to actually get to the real compost. And there's going to be some bacteria and whatnot. Darn bugs. And I don't want to breathe that stuff. I don't want to get farmer's lung. So I'm going to use one of these handy dandy masks left over from the COVID era. If you don't want to wear a mask, don't wear one. Go ahead and get farmer's lung, but I don't want to get farmer's lung. So I put on a mask. And already I can see a few things that are pretty long in here, like this guy. And the things I flipped, they look to be all right. Not too much needs to happen there. But as you can see, let me move it over there real quick. Already have some compost from the, what was composted already from the middle of the pile before we threw in all this recent stuff. And it's going to get mixed in pretty good. That's going to help keep the compost pile moving along nicely. There we go. It's obviously best to cut things up before you throw them into the compost pile, but I'm not always the one that throws it in the pile. And other people are working away and are trying to get their job done. And so that doesn't always happen, and that's okay. You can always cut it up later, like I'm doing now. Stuff in the middle there is pretty well composted already. I got some long ones here I'm going to cut up. But the stuff in the middle, it's almost good to go. And that stuff was, not that old. Let's see, get my clippers. The farther down we get into the pile will be stuff I've already clipped. So shouldn't be as much clipping going on. But it's just mainly stuff on top that's new. I like to also make sure it kind of stays as level as possible, in a single layer. Oh, good number of worms. It's good to see. There's some newer stuff I buried. When I take kitchen scraps normally, when I add them to the pile, I don't just dump them on top because that's just going to invite all kinds of pests you don't necessarily want. Anything that likes rotted food, flies and so forth. So I usually dig a hole and bury it. So I'm not sure if you can see that. So here's some, watermelon rinds and, other things that were buried in there. There's also some ants, as you can tell. Ants happen. Usually people online say, oh, it's due to a dry pile. But I don't know. This is a pretty moist pile right now. So I think they can be attracted to a number of things. In this case, they can be attracted to the food that's in here, all the kitchen scraps. Just like you have ants in your house, if you leave a lot of food lying around, a lot of food in the compost pile, so you can get ants. That's okay. Ants actually do burrow holes. They help aerate the pile. They eat things in the pile, help break it down. The problem is that they will attack or kill worms, these certain types of ants. But let me show you this. That's a goodie pile right there. Look at all those worms. That was a good scoop. So even though there are ants in the pile, it doesn't mean all the worms will disappear. You can still have worms in there. So we can get the rest of this greenery stuff. So it's on in the middle. And it's be covered up by the more composted stuff, so it'll help it compost along. Get some scoops of the greens. Ooh, that's kind of a long one right there. So if you have ants in your pile, and it's dry, well, usually just adding water would do it, especially if you're just putting in grass clippings and leaves and things like that. Vines from the garden, flowers. It's most likely because it's too dry. But if you're putting in kitchen scraps, and it's moist like mine is, there's not much to be done. And there are some remedies people have online for things you can sprinkle on the pile, but I found it doesn't really hurt anything. It still composts just fine, and eventually the ants go away. If you have a horror story about ants in your compost pile, leave a comment, let me know. Also, the constant flipping. If you go back and forth, the more you go back and forth, the fewer ants. You know, ants don't like their home constantly destroyed, so a lot of times they'll pack it up and move after that. There's remnants of an eggshell there. I stopped composting eggshells a while back, or a couple months ago. I realized they just don't break down very quickly compared to everything else. About halfway through, yeah, I'll flip arms. Just don't completely wear out one side of my body versus the other. And from this side, it's a little easier. I can just throw it right in. Don't have to do as much walking. Now I have noticed this. I've gotten to this layer. This happens sometimes. Let me show you this. There can be things at the bottom of the pile that just turn yellow like that. And it'll be a strong stench of ammonia. I think it's a sign of way too many greens compared to browns, number one. Anytime you have a really strong ammonia stench. But hey, I didn't get enough leaf, even though I have a lot of trees around, I didn't get enough of the collecting as many leaves as I wanted to in the fall. So we kind of ran out of those. So I could put in cardboard and things like that. But this stuff will still compost. It'll just smell a little bit. So I like to break it up when I see it, air it out, spread it out, and it will break down. It's just, it's not ideal. My pile is too heavy in greens right now at that point in the pile. So if you don't want to deal with the smell, for instance, your compost pile is close to your house or something, you don't want to open your window and not have to smell it. Mine's a good 100 feet or more from my house, so it doesn't really matter where my neighbors too. It's pretty far away from them. But, so it doesn't bug me as much, except for when I'm flipping the compost. But, you know, you can always add cardboard, like not whole cardboard strips, you know, cut it up pretty finely. And that's an interesting piece. I'll show you that. Some grass clippings that we're composting will turn white as the bacteria, everything is eating it up pretty good. So grass clippings are great. With grass clippings though, be sure you're not putting any pesticides or any harmful chemicals. People say, oh, don't avoid chemicals. Everything's a chemical. Water's a chemical. 2 part hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. But harmful chemicals. So this year we went all organic with our lawn, and then we use the grass clippings, and they're great. More grass clippings, a little bit more of the yucky smelling stuff. Trying to even it out a little bit. Bunch of grass clippings there. Definitely glad I'm wearing this mask. It's like a plume of course, could have just been my breath on my glasses, but it seemed like there's a plume of, you know, white stuff from the compost poofing up there. For wearing the mask, got to breathe in a lungful of that. Now this is really exciting, huh? But this is kind of the process. Scoop it over with a pitchfork. You know, clip anything that's too long or, you know, really long. Try to even it out. Try to grab from different sections of the compost pile instead of it's all the same level. And then help mix things up a little bit. So if there's a lot of grass, hopefully it mixes with some other things. Some garden scraps or some, you know, kitchen scraps, whatever. Another cool thing about the November composting, after this will be more composted by November. It's mid-September right now. Not sure if I'll flip it again, but even if I don't, this should be pretty well composted by then. If it's not fully composted, it's still okay to spread. It will compost kind of on its own over winter, and you know, it'll break down under the snow and everything. More of the ammonia, yucky stuff. You spread that around. If anybody has any more information on that, the yellow-green ammonia smelling stuff, ways to prevent it, or other than it being too green, let me know. Drop a comment. So me doing this with a pitchfork, kind of almost like fluffing it. I'm a compost fluffer. Ooh, I can get some shirts made up for that. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of grass here that kind of started matting up. All right, it's getting to where it's kind of reaching the top. Hey, look, my ants are going everywhere. So let me put this guy back on. And continue. Now I'm getting down here where there's a lot more leaves too, because this stunk so badly a couple or 3 flips ago that I threw in a whole bunch of leaves to hopefully combat the smell a little bit. And it worked. Next day it wasn't stinking at all. I still had some leaves back then. Now I'm out of them. So let's take off this last piece. Almost there to the point where I can show you the secret of how to clean the bottom. Or at least my secret, which won't be a secret for much longer now that I'm putting it on YouTube. Of course, I don't have that many people that watch these things, so maybe it'll still be just our secret. Okay, as soon as you get to the point where it's like that and it just falls between the tines on the pitchfork, put the pitchfork away. And now, my favorite tool. Leaf scoopers. They're not just for the fall. You can scoop it right in there. Dump it right over. And maybe one more gathering. That's about it. All right. So you can see that's pretty clean. And there's the pile. There's some worms already in there, you can see. This little guy's crawling inward. I saw one over there, he already crawled in. They don't like to be on top. They like to get back down in there. So that's a little bug of some kind. That's pretty much it. Oh, one last thing. The magic ingredient. Thermometer. Put this guy back in. Somewhere towards the middle. Let it sit there. It's probably pretty cold. I just aerated it. So it's just going to sit there, yeah, roughly room temperature, or not room temperature, outdoor temperature, which is about 70 right now. And sure enough, that's where it's sitting. I'll check back in a couple of days, see what the temperature is like. But otherwise, that's pretty much it. Ooh, look at that piece of plastic. That's not good. Throw that out of there. Check back in a couple of days, see how it's doing. In the meantime, all the new stuff will go in here. And yeah, that hopefully this is in good enough position where it'll be ready for November. I'll flip it into here with the done pile. And then that's pretty much it. We'll spread that in November. All the stuff we collect until then, which includes a lot of garden stuff and kitchen scraps and fall leaves and will go into here. And then once that's flipped into here, which may happen next month or so, while it's still warmer weather, I'll keep flipping back and forth every few days to hopefully get the compost, activated sooner. And then, I guess I don't need to wear this anymore. And then it should be in good shape for overwintering. Then I'll put the tops back on, which are sitting over there right now. Actually, before the last flip, I would line the pile with like cardboard. Go watch the other video I made on winter composting. But I'll line the pile with cardboard, probably put a blanket on top. I need to paint the tops as well to get more of the sun's rays. So I'm gonna paint them black probably. And then it'll just sit there in the middle, insulated as best I can. And with with the black top, trapping as many greenhouse gases as possible, or greenhouse effect, many sun's rays as possible. Not gases. Well, I guess there probably would be. It is breaking down, so probably. I'm not a scientist. I don't know. But that's it. That's how I flip my compost. And I do that pretty often from June through September. And now it's less so, at least for this pile. There you go. Hope this helps. Thanks for watching. Cheers.